Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to wait a few moments while people come in for the waiting room before we get on to our conversation today. So, good morning. I am delighted today to be exploring one of my favourite collecting categories, the rich and varied objets d'art, or gadgets and gizmos, and for want of a better word, often called toys for boys, which is possibly a little sexist in terms of the term and outdated, as it's certainly appealing to me as to anyone of the opposite sex. But I think glamorous, luxurious travel of the 1920s and 30s, or indeed going to war, and during the Napoleonic Wars and the campaign furniture. But I think what a lot of these objects have in common today show ingenuity of design as well as aesthetic promise. So it's that perfect balance between function and form. And what is even more of a pleasure today is that it's the first LAPADA leader webinar that is actually totally populated by LAPADA members. So that is a real joy. And each of these members are global leading specialists in their field, and they've each kind of developed quite interesting niche categories of collecting. So without further ado, we have Tim Bent from Bentley's, and you will, I'm sure, be familiar with the antiques and vintage leather and various other things that he proffers. We have Sean Clarke from Christopher Clarke Antiques, who specialises in campaign furniture. And we also have Allan Hatchwell from Hatchwell Antiques, who sell a plethora of things, but you might particularly be familiar with their aeronautical, optical and 20th century design. So I think one of the things that is very interesting for me is that each of you represent quite a niche market. And I just wondered, before we kind of got into looking at some of the objects that you sell and learning a bit more, how you actually develop that sort of specialist knowledge and what drew you to that area. So I'm going to start with the oldest collecting category first with Sean, with the campaign furniture, and then we'll move the conversation around. But how did you get into this world, Sean, of campaign furniture?
Well, I started off, obviously the family has had a business since the very early 60s, but I never worked for my father. I started off working for a specialist in sporting antiques, Manfred Schotten Antiques in Burford. And he offered me a job and I said, well, I really don't know if I want to be an antique dealer or not. Let's give each other a month and see how we get on. And because he was dealing in such different items to my family, and it was all involved in sport, I mean, he was basically the first dealer in sporting antiques. Golf clubs, tennis rackets, art on rugby. It was a very different way of dealing. And this was before the internet, and we would be sending out lists of early tennis rackets to collectors or golf art. And so when my brother and I took over our father's shop, he didn't deal in campaign furniture at all. We wanted to specialize in something, and because of what I'd learned at Manfred's. And it took us a few years to find campaign furniture. We'd always been interested in it. We didn't know if we could find enough out there, and we didn't know if there would be enough people interested in it. A friend did a book on it, British Campaign Furniture, Elegance Under Canvas, Nick Brower. We put a few items in the book. He asked for a few items of ours. The book sold incredibly well. We did an exhibition and people just said, we've been waiting for a shop like you.
Amazing.
So we went for it.
Amazing, thank you. And actually, just before I go on, what I omitted to say is that please do feel free to put any questions you want to put to our specialist today in the Q&A function at the bottom, and in the chat area, Gillian will put some links to the websites and to any reference materials and things we talk about in the chat field. So Tim, to you, how did you fall in love with Louis Vuitton and Goyard and all of these things?
Well, I started collecting when I was at school, and I soon started dealing in vintage clothes while I was at school. And that led from that sort of Savile Row tweed suited English gentleman and that whole look that I did then quickly developed into the accessories that 1920s gent would have carried with him. And I found actually that's really what appealed to me. And in the late 80s, you could access that market really quite easily. It was the prices were incredibly reasonable. So I just ended up with mountains of leather suitcases that I would merrily polish at home and then sort of sell to friends. And I got stopped in the street by an Italian carrying a pair of Gladstone bags. And he persuaded me to sell one of them. And I thought, oh, this is quite an interesting little niche. So that sort of is what sparked it. And it then developed into learning more and more about the sort of luxury brands of that era. Vuitton, of course, the most famous, but Asprey and Drew & Sons, there are an awful lot of English makers of that time as well. And that whole romance of travel from the sort of late 19th century through to the heyday in the 20s and 30s is what captured my imagination. And it sort of, the business grew from that.
Amazing. It's a wonderful, wonderful shop as well. It's a real pleasure to go into it. Allan, let's go, while we're traveling, you take those things apart. So talk to us about how you develop your kind of specialist eye and knowledge.
Well, my father had started the business in '61 as a classic sort of European traveling dealer, being with Biedermeier and those sorts of things. And then about 25 years ago, I actually went into an aircraft hangar and saw some things that were quite exciting. And well, I thought they could be exciting, and we thought, well, what can we do here? So our first sort of delving into aeronautical things and scientific things was actually a pair of Concorde engines, and Concorde hadn't quite stopped then, or was just around that time. So there wasn't a lot of, strangely wasn't a lot of interest. And that led on to scientific instruments, and then development. As you start this, the wonderful thing about the trade is that it just grows. It's like this amazing tree that you start with one little thing, like an aircraft part, and then you lead on to discovering how somebody actually developed the part of that engine. And I know it sounds very niche, but actually you start encountering these extraordinary people that are responsible for how the world runs and it's, you know, as much a piece of technology and scientific instrument as it is as a beautiful bag or a beautiful, you know, this Sean is early technology and early 20th century with luggage, and it's an extra, you know, I went forward into that, and that developed into scientific instruments such as binoculars and then naval instruments and pianos, and that's through the design side. So, and I was very lucky to be involved with a family, father who traveling was very easy and logistics were just not even a consideration. It was just like, buy something, put it on a container and ship it, you know, and I think that has been part of the ability to be able to grow in a rather strange way, you know, not be frightened of something that weighs half a ton or is 9 foot long. And that, although it doesn't fit in every living room, it does challenge the perspective as when people encounter the shops. It becomes quite an interesting and enlightening environment.
Yeah, your shop is like an Aladdin's cave. I mean,
it is probably too much.
Lots of things out of scale. It's extraordinary. And I sort of, yeah, your father might have found 2020 quite frustrating in terms of travel and logistics. I know we're going to have a look at some of the images of things you sell in a minute, but I'm quite interested to know how, in terms of developing the business, were there sort of outside trends and influences that actually help shape the direction of and actually how you kind of built the business? And I think I might start with you, Tim, on that, with in terms of the luggage and things. Were there trends and things going on that helped promote your business?
Yeah, I think the ironic thing is that it took an American to really kickstart the appreciation of that sort of Edwardian look. And when Ralph Lauren decided that he would take tweed and make it fashionable and very fashionable, and as his influence grew around the world, that really did sort of spark a complete sort of reevaluation, and maybe a generational reevaluation as well, where people had seen luggage and suitcases as heavy and impractical, and why on earth would anyone want to carry a leather suitcase or even have a leather suitcase in their house, it kind of became an accepted and understood look that actually these should be appreciated as just a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, and of that sort of warmth of the leather and the warmth of the, you know, combination of brass and wood. And so Ralph Lauren really brought that into the living room, and you know, trunks really from that time have been used as much as decoration as they have as a practical sort of traveling thing. There are still some people that will travel with them. We sell a lot for vintage cars and things, but you know, the main market is still decoration. And then there's that sort of slightly rarefied collector as well, who sees it as a collecting field.
This is a completely sort of by the by, but one of the first things I worked on was Christie's South Ken. We sold this teddy, Steiff teddy, for a fortune, and I was actually sort of holding it as the bids went up, and it was then traveled to Japan in a Louis Vuitton case that was made just for Teddy Girl and her outfits, and she had her own seat on the plane in her Louis Vuitton trunk to go there. But anyway, that's another. For you, Sean, it was a book and a sort of a dipping your toe and then it taking off. But were there sort of outside influences and people interested in?
Well, we decided fairly early on, through the outside influence, I mean, they probably don't even realise, of Whitney Antiques, who of course specialised in samplers, still do. Yeah. And we saw the way that they put together these very smart catalogues full of information that were a fantastic selling tool. And also there was so little written on samplers, 1 or 2 books perhaps, but they really added to the academic knowledge of the world of samplers. So we decided right from the beginning that we would make our catalogues a big thing, and really try and save and add as much information as we can about campaign furniture and its makers and also its users. And a big part of our business is research and hoarding this information. I mean, our archive, probably like Tim and Allan, is huge. So they were a very strong influence, Whitney Antiques, to as a business model. But I don't think there's anybody else really who's specialised in campaign furniture. Still, there's dealers who like it and have 2 or 3 pieces. But I think probably because we did our catalogues from fairly early on, people just looked at us and thought, well, they're fairly well set up. We're never going to catch them up.
Do you think that, but that's the sort of, this is a dreaded word, and forgive me, but just thinking about the ingenuity and the skill and the craftsmanship about creating something that's portable and flat pack. I mean, the sort of advent of the IKEA monster, did that just allow anyone to just really understand the real skill and craftsmanship of a few hundred years before in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, the name IKEA does get mentioned in the shop quite an awful lot by customers, but they always follow it up with, but of course the quality of this is 1,000 times better. And obviously with IKEA, it's meant to be set up once you can work out the instructions eventually. And
all the pieces are included, because they may not be.
And then never dismantled again. Whereas with campaign furniture, you set it up, you take it down again, you move camp, and on you go. And so the necessity is the mother of invention, of course, and some fantastic design has come out of having to make something to be portable, to dismantle, and the different ways to do it. And of course, originally in the 18th century and with the Georgian furniture, it was very much keeping the look of the domestic furniture, but if you looked underneath it, you'd find hidden hinges or bolts, and it would dismantle. And then through the 19th century, it developed its own look, the classic look that we know now of the campaign chest with brass corners and brass straps.
I think we're going to take a look at those in a minute. I think what we might do is, Alan, we'll move on to you, and maybe if you talk us a little bit through, but show us some images as well. And I think we've got Gillian online, ready, poised to maybe share her screen, so that you can kind of talk us through some of your areas. Is that okay, Gillian? Are you? Oh, here we go.
Ah, okay. I think we got to. Okay, I'm going to talk about three things which have a link.
Okay.
The first one actually is the
Wow.
Leger torpedo, Gillian. Actually, I hope you've got the image. Yeah, that's it. There we go. Okay, so we deal in sort of quirky scientific stuff and things that I find it exciting. And this was a rare piece actually that I found about a year ago. And it's a very early torpedo. Now, this was made by a company called Leger, who were involved with Kelvin Hughes and Lord Kelvin, who at the time. And this was a traction torpedo, which means it was pulled, and it was pulled behind. It was developed. This is 1886, and it was designed to be pulled around behind a boat or across a harbour entrance to protect ships. And moored ships or harbour entrances, and you can see the point at the front. That is actually a charge, and it's set off when it impacts on something. But it actually didn't go into a lot of development because they were very scared that actually it might just run into their own ship and blow their own ships up. So it was very hairy days. But the torpedo is an extraordinary object because it transformed what was to come and transformed armies. And then this leads me on. This was a pulled object. Now the second piece is a gyroscope, a torpedo gyroscope. Yeah, and I've actually got one here, which is a bit later. But the gyroscope was a guidance system, and it was first. Just stop me if I'm going on too much. But the gyroscope was the system that actually guided a torpedo, and it was invented by a guy called Whitehead, who was an English fellow, and he tried to sell it to the British Navy and everyone else, but actually it was the Austro-Hungarian who believed in it. And this little piece here, that's called an Aubrey system, and it spins around. I can show you this. Basically, you can see it on my screen, I think.
We might have to go share the screen so we can see you again, and then we'll be able to see it better.
That's what it is. It's something that spins, and I don't know if you're familiar with the gyroscopic effect, but as soon as you have something that spins, it means it's difficult to move, and you can reverse that movement into guiding a torpedo straight and going straight and at a certain depth. So it's a monumental little bit of engineering that transformed world history, because until that time, the way you imposed your power was with a very large battleship which had very large guns and lots of them. So then you could just go around the world, and that's the history of the empires and how they grew. Suddenly, with this little piece here, which was really a very low cost, you could attach it to a torpedo, and you could with a small fast boat you could endanger very large fleets. So that completely changed the naval balance in the world. And then so my
we're allowed to ask prices for some of these things.
Yeah, you can ask whatever you like. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Yeah. The big torpedo. I mean, there's only one or two in the world, and that's around 20,000. The gyroscopes are at 3,000, and they're quite rare. The one I've shown you is actually a very it's quite a modern one, but it's extreme. They're gas powered. They're compressed air.
And we just had a question come in, because it's not worth waiting till the end, asking how big the torpedo is. What are the dimensions?
It's 1 meter 56 long. It is.
Okay, thank you.
And they're very detailed images of it on the website.
Okay, carry on. Sorry.
And then finally, I won't keep you long. Finally, there's a photograph of a pair of binoculars, which Tim, of course, is very au fait with. And these are, I'm linking it because they're Japanese, and they're made by Nikko, who are they're now known as Nikon, and they're Second World War binoculars. They're substantial. They're about 36 inches long, and the optics are all German, because they were buying optics from Zeiss and Schott and all that, those sort of people in Germany. And they're described as nighttime torpedo binoculars. So they were made for the Imperial Japanese Navy, and they magnify 10 times. So there's a link. So the Japanese weren't really, they were very, they felt that they quite superior, and they weren't developing radar and the such so much. So they concentrated on their optics, and these are a fabulous pair of binoculars which have sensational quality, or viewing quality, because it's all about the glass. So I want to give you a little link of how things develop, and suddenly so you go from the torpedo to actually worrying about guiding the torpedo, and then watching the torpedo. So and that's what I wanted to talk to you about, and show you how things link, and that's really the beauty of the business, and how you can just expand, and it captures you. So there we are.
And these are each quite, substantial size, but in terms of some of the other things you sell are sort of large scale.
Yes, we do. We're very well known for our wind tunnel models, aircraft wind tunnel models, which are all the models developed for airplanes to fly. And now actually we're trying to get into ship models, but they're really big. They're like 15, 16, and they're not many of them for obvious reasons. But it's surprising how long the tanks, the ship models have been going, because they're very they've been actually the one up in Scotland, or there was one in Scotland, and they were testing models in water in the beginning of the 20th century. It's quite advanced flow tank models that were designed to measure flow. Amazing. And so that's I must say that I think when you asked how the business develops, people like Sean and Tim, and to a degree us, we've actually we've set. I actually feel now. I dare say that we've actually set trends, and the campaign furniture and the luggage. There aren't so many people that have done it, but by promoting the online and shows, suddenly it's captured people, and I think very much a lot of the big dealers and the dealers around that they do set trends, and it flows. We see it a lot actually. So it's generated by the dealers as much as by society, really.
Yeah, I think you've each of you have sort of spearheaded these movements and are the leaders. Do you find, Allan, in terms of how do you source these objects now? Do people come to you if they've got something like this to sell because they know who you are, or are you busy trying to go into various hangars and warehouses across the world to source some of these things?
Yeah, we have a lot of people that offer things, but it's harder to find now than it was, and also the internet is a double-edged sword. It's fantastic for sourcing, for education, and for research. It also takes away the energy that you put into doing all that work, and shows people exactly what they can go from one thing to another straight away, from source to retail, basically. So overall, the web is sensational and a positive plus for everything, really. But we get offered, we're known for it, and we travel everywhere. It's worldwide now. We can find things everywhere.
Yes, thankfully, our virtual existence, thankfully. Yeah. So Tim, I know you have an amazing archive, and I think that is quite interesting in terms of, again, each of you sort of being leaders in your field, that presumably you're a resource. If I was going to ask where somebody should learn about this discipline, it's probably going back to each of you. Yeah. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that, and then go through to show us, because I know you put together some wonderful images so that we get to sort of have a look at some of the items you sell.
Yeah. I think the archive is incredibly valuable. It's a very easy way to share that information as well. And, we have a real connection with craft and craftsmen, and the archive of imagery that we keep on the website, is often used by them. I had a German craftsman who got in touch and said, I really do refer to these all the time, because the skills have either been lost or very nearly lost, and it's that sort of perfection of the skills that you see in, you know, a piece of leather from 1900, where really it didn't get better than that. And those skills, you have to have a visual reference for that. We've also built a really big physical archive as well. So the shop is very much about the sort of pieces in the best possible condition and the best quality we can find. But actually it's really interesting to reference a smaller piece or a particular detail on a trunk or a case. So we built it and share that archive as well. So I think it is a really important resource, and I'm sure, you know, Sean and Allan as well. You know, it's good to be protected.
Well, presumably as well, yeah, you're protecting it and you're keeping it for the next generation, because without dealers like you, actually the knowledge and ability to sort of research and understand these items may very well disappear. Like, I mean, we won't get into the ivory conversation, but that is something that may happen. But to maybe show us, so can you talk us through some things so we can see some of the pieces?
So probably, you know, I should think.
Oh, here we go. Oh, right.
One of the things where we are most well known for at Bentley's is our collection of vintage Vuitton trunks. And I mean, these almost fall into a field and a category of on their own. That the sort of luxury brands is something that we specialize in, and there are really strong collectors and archives, particularly just for Vuitton or for a company like Goya. And the luxury brands actually do protect their own heritage as well. And so Vuitton themselves have 25,000 pieces of vintage luggage that they've made. So, and Hermès actually have an amazing collection, a broader collection in some ways, of examples of campaign furniture, and of their own leather work and pieces that inspire. And I think we do find a lot of designers come to us looking for inspiration of, you know, a detail or perhaps an understanding of a style from a particular era. So this particular enormous wardrobe trunk, it's not something you'd ever want to carry yourself, but of course they never did. They never had to carry anything themselves, so weight was completely secondary. Is a very unusual construction. It's upright, really sort of in the flesh. It's a really imposing piece of furniture now. But it was built for function. It was probably a man, this one possibly for a man. It would have had a tray underneath, that's of a drawer underneath as well, but it probably would have taken 20 or 30, perhaps more, even more than that, suits, though. Wow. It would have weighed a lot. The
so
one
deep in the tray at the end, was that for shoes and stuff? Is that
shoes and hats? Yeah, yeah. The other, which has all of the drawers on the right hand side, hanging on the left hand side, is a more classic style of wardrobe trunk. And all of the drawers are either divided or they were, you know, for gloves, for scarves, ties. And this one you could actually hang a dress as well over the longer hanger on the left hand side. So again, very heavy, but beautifully constructed. I mean, incredibly strong, and it's remarkable that they've survived, but testament to how well they were designed in the first place.
What else do we have? That's yeah.
Yes. I'm a massive Land Rover fan, so that was an indulgent photograph of
that was brilliant. I love that photograph with the sort of fishing bag and the tackle bag on the side as well. Is it fishing tackle?
Yeah, it is. There's a lovely leather top creel. So I mean, we've got a lot of sporting pieces as well from that.
It's gorgeous. Great photo. Great photo. Okay.
So this is a beautiful dressing case. I just think this is so evocative an era that to think that you would travel like this, it's quite similar to the way that campaign furniture was used. It was that expectation that you would need an entire tortoiseshell dressing set, crystal bottles, silver mounted, you know, wherever you went. I mean, I love it. And the quality of that is just exquisite. But actually the case is very discreet. That's really my favorite Vuitton, is that leather, the best quality leather, very understated, But if you know where to look, you'll see their branding. Every single stud is branded.
Really?
Marked, all of the clips are marked, but it's really, subtle. I love that.
Gorgeous. Okay. Have we got any? Oh, yes.
So for your salmon fishermen, this is where the shop really is developed from. The core is always going to be luggage and leather is what we're best known for, but we have a really big collection of gentlemanly silver. And
so how much would something like this be?
This is £4,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his eye? Has he got a gemstone or something?
It's a glass eye, a ruby glass eye. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it sits in the hand so well. It's a swimming salmon, and so it has a beautiful weight. It was made in 1914. It has its original case, which is fantastic and so unusual to see. But there's something about craftsmanship of that period where they knew how something should feel, and that the curve of the salmon as it moves just sits in the palm of your hand. It feels absolutely beautiful. This is so crisp, you can feel every scale. It's lovely.
The tail, the definition on the tail is just beautiful, and the fin and the
tail. It has all of the hallmarks, and it's a registered design is marked on the other side. It's just a lovely thing, and though it may well sell, it's a very gentlemanly thing, but it's just as likely to sell to a woman who's looking for that special present.
Yeah,
it's a really charming thing.
Amazing, thank you. And we've got the English picnic, not the weather for it today where I am, but
but it's very clever, Ray. It's completely waterproof, so that locks down. They obviously knew this is an English set made by Coracle or under the brand Coracle by Scott's, and it has a sort of weatherproofing system that it closes so tight, and the lock has a little clip that hides the keyhole, so it was totally weatherproof. But so it was indeed designed for an English picnic.
And is it bamboo or something?
Yeah, it's rattan bound. All of
how gorgeous!
So that it gives some extra protection.
So we've got that. So you've got the cutlery, you've got thermos, you've got sort of condiments jar.
Yeah, butter and sugar. It's all the original teacups, all in both China. And all of the glasses stacked together as well. So it's as compact as you could make a picnic set for 4 people. And it was designed to strap onto the running boards of a Bentley or a Rolls Royce of the 20s.
That's got to have a good home. That's absolutely wonderful. Love it. Okay. And now, okay.
And that is the shop. So I mean,
is that the shop, or is that a stand at maybe our fair or something, or is it the shop?
That's actually the shop, but actually the stand at LAPADA, the fair, looks
very similar. Very
similar. Yeah. It is a bit of a treasure trove. You never quite know what you're going to find in there, but it's got
and the chair, the sort of could be equally at home in Allan's shop as well, couldn't it? There's some crossover between.
Yeah, and Martin Baker ejector seat. It's like the ultimate bit of English engineering that has saved so many lives. I mean, it and still a privately held company. Still
really,
amazing piece of engineering.
Thank you.
And then Goya as well. And there's a beautiful Goya wardrobe trunk. That interesting brand, really. It was sort of the relatively unknown in comparison to Vuitton, but now it's a real collector's piece and a very successful brand.
Do you think that's also because they really had a sort of, maybe is it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where they suddenly really sort of pushed themselves in Mayfair and Paris again? It felt like it had gone very understated, and then actually there was sort of quite a marketing push behind them.
Yeah, they've never advertised. It's owned by Jean-Michel Signola. He's a very enthusiastic collector. He was a collector. He had 400 pieces of Goya, and eventually persuaded the family to sell to him because they trusted that he would keep it in the way that they thought it should. And it's grown incredibly successfully, but still quite understated.
Amazing, thank you. Well, I think we might move on to Sean, because I'm sort of aware that time is marching on, and we've got lots of other things to talk about. And I know you've got some pictures to show us, but I'd love you to tell us a little bit about some of the helmets behind you as well that are launching today, because it's quite nice if you've got something that you can actually handle and show us.
Yeah, I mean, these are a little bit unusual for us to buy. We normally just deal in English campaign and travel items, and these are French Grand Army Napoleonic miniature helmets. But sometimes you see something and the quality of it and the beauty of it as a dealer, and hopefully as a customer, you just think, God, I've got to have that. That's fantastic. And we've got a collection, you can maybe see them behind me, of 24 of these. And they were made around about 1900, either side of 1900, by a Frenchman called Charles Sandre. Basically for people to collect, but they are made with the same attention to detail and the same quality of materials as the original Shakos. So, you know, they're lined in red silk. I mean, just the work into this plume, just fantastic.
Is it?
And there's a Hussards Busby here as well.
Oh,
They're just wonderful.
okay.
And yes, they're being seen on the first time at 1 o'clock today on LAPADA Firsts. So that'll be their first opportunity coming up for sale.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing them all in detail. I know we've sort of talked about maybe a chest being the sort of the starting point of collecting campaign furniture. Do you want, I know you've got some images as well, and perhaps there's one thing I would love. I love that, the table. But anyway, if Gillian shares the screen and you could maybe give me through some of your key objects, and then we can
well, I think really okay, well, and this is something I've actually got here as well, so it would probably be better if we got rid of that photograph, Gillian, if we could. Well, let's talk about this. I mean, I think what unites us, the three of us as dealers, and of course what this talk is all about, is why are people interested in these things? And it's the wow factor. It's the wow factor either because the design is fantastic and it does something very clever, which we'll come on to later, or it's the history behind it. And this trunk, Captain Blackwood's Waterloo trunk, as we called it, was just the perfect storm for us as a piece of research. It was actually the People's Choice for the LAPADA Object of the Year in 2012. And what we found out about this trunk was made by Thomas Hanford, who had a business on the Strand. He kept on moving between shops on the Strand. And in January 1815, he moved to number 7 Strand, which is the address on the label of this trunk. But the owner engraved to the top is Captain Blackwood's 69th Regiment. And after Napoleon was sent off to Elba, Blackwood's original regiment was disbanded. And then when Napoleon came back, he re-enlisted and joined the 69th Regiment. So he had to have bought this trunk after January 1815, when Hanford moved addresses, and as he joined the 69th Regiment. And he would have bought it to take to France to go and fight Napoleon. And the reason that we know that he had to have bought it in that period is because sadly he died at Waterloo and he's buried at the Orchard at Hougoumont. So from a research point of view and a historical point of view, it's just, wow, this item was probably at Waterloo. And you tell somebody that when they come into the shop about a piece, and you can see their eyes light up. It's just, you're immediately there, and it's not just an antique, and what am I going to do with it? It's, my goodness, what a piece of history. So that's great as far as we're concerned from research. And a lot of our items, you know, we manage to, if they've got an owner's name, we can go through the army lists and all the rest of it, do our research and find out when they bought it, depending on his rank on the piece, and where he might have been, where this piece might have traveled, and its history comes alive. But the other wow factor, and of course this relates to Allan's stock, and Tim's stock is the clever design, the ingenuity of design. And perhaps, Gillian, if you could move on to the Thornhill briefcase table.
I love this.
This is another thing. And hopefully you can imagine that when those straps are removed from the table as a briefcase and it's lied down on its side, basically you undo a couple of clips. You've got some finger holes. You put your fingers in, you just lift it up, and the legs stand on its hinges, and then you put down the angled bracing bars, lock those, and all of a sudden you've got a table which has come out of nothing. And the ingenuity of design is just fantastic. This one was made by Thornhill, who were high-end retailers on New Bond Street. The design's also commonly associated with Albert Barker, who was another high-end retailer, and he started off in partnership with Thornhill between 1875 and 1885. But then also Tim was probably had a few of these. They also made a version which turned into a picnic basket. So instead of a card table at the top, there was actually a wicker basket at the top, which was full of all the items you'd need for a good picnic, and it would fold out. And G.W. Scott and Sons are known for making those. But just a fantastic piece of design, really.
Do you, when you receive something like that, do you immediately know how it works because you've been doing this so long, or are there some where you're slightly dumbfounded before you can find the hidden catches or where you put your fingers or how to?
Well, there are some pieces, yeah, and certainly with secret drawers.
Yeah.
And your brain gets tuned in when you deal in a certain field to look for certain things. So we've bought campaign furniture off other people before, and they never realized it was made to dismantle. But because your brain is locked in, your eyes locked in, you realize there's something just slightly off with the design, and then you wonder why. And with secret drawers as well, you pull out a little drawer of a secretaire and you think, well, that's way too short for the space of the box. Something must be going on behind, and you investigate. And occasionally you might find a medal or something exciting in there.
I remember Butcher found somebody's jawbone in a secret drawer of something, which was kind of interesting. What else have we got?
Well,
oh yeah.
Well, these are Brighton buns. If we come off the screen, Gillian, then I can actually show people. Now, Brighton buns are, again, just a classic piece of design. So much so that they were made for probably over 150 years. Started off in the 18th century with very smart silver sets. And in the 19th century, you get a lot of brass ones. These are cast brass. And basically, they're two candlesticks. So we unscrew the top, and you've got two dishes, and then you've got the two sconces, and you screw it in like that. And you've got a candlestick. Just fantastic design and very compact. It makes its own packing case for travel. Yeah. And they made these in lots of different materials over a long period of time. So this set are pressed brass. They're closer to 1900 in date. Oriental hardwood, silver, and a wide range of prices as well, from say £100 up to getting on for probably 10,000 for a good pair of silver 18th century Brighton buns in their case. But just fantastic design. And Gillian showed earlier on the screen.
Oh, it's tiny.
But you wouldn't have seen it like this. This is a candlestick. Yeah. And just the ingenuity of design. So if we unfold it like that, we've got to prick it, and then we can remove the drip pan on that, and then you've got three legs which fold out like that, and it'll stand.
And then you can write your little journal of the day of what happened at Waterloo.
Exactly. And I'm just really clever design.
Yeah. Do they, I know, I mean, a lot of it is obviously very practical things, but do you have sort of gaming tables and things like that
Hello?
as well?
Sorry.
Do you have gaming tables and things like that as well that people?
Funny you should say that, Freya, but of course you didn't have TV in those days, so you had to do something in your downtime. So a roll-up chessboard. Amazing. Very useful. And that's late 19th century. But going a little bit earlier in dates, we've got a chess box here, but in it, we have got the means to turn it into a table. So you've got tripod legs.
Wow.
You've got a column which screws to it. It will then extend. And then the top will sit on it like that. And all of a sudden, you've got a chess table.
Ready for a game. Amazing.
Ready for a game.
That's gorgeous.
Fantastic design.
So I'm just sort of conscious of time, but for all of you, and maybe I'll start with you, Allan, in terms of the disciplines that you cover, do we just have to sort of sit back and appreciate these items, or can we use some of them?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know when you're going to use a traction torpedo. I mean, I wouldn't advise anyone to use one of those. But certainly, the binoculars, they're always fully functioning, you know, and they're restored. Both Tim and I, you know, we restore them, and they're fabulous to use. And they're actually so extraordinary that unless you've owned one or have used one, the quality isn't appreciated. And I'm sure Tim will agree, but you know, if you actually get a pair outside and let somebody look at something a couple of miles away, their world is complete. You know, you completely transform people understanding of what a really well-made optical instrument is, and so they're very usable. And then the furniture is usable, and the luggage is, you know. I mean, there's multiple uses, and values are always going up. So even if it's not something that you can use all the time, it's certainly to be appreciated, and it does appreciate, you know, because these things are becoming more and more scarce. So yeah, I mean, I think there's an assumption that you can't use things, but actually, most of these things, the campaign furniture was made with incredibly robustly, designed exactly to be thrown around by the roughest sort of environment and also with the binoculars, they were really made without budget, and all these things were you know, it's very, except in the military world today, you're not in spheres where there is no budget, and so these things are optimum quality and optimum, they're made to endure. So it's not you know, it's something to really to value and treasure and really use. And you know, if you've got a place on Côte d'Azur up in the mountains, or just a great view over a city, it really, or just looking at the moon. I mean, the most the lowest power binocular, you'll see beautiful craters on the moon. And I mean, I have one at home, and I use with my child all the time, and she just, you know, she's fascinated. She says, "Dad, can I see the moon?" And that, you know, that's what you do.
It strikes me actually with all of your areas that it's a great sort of entry into collecting, and for children, because of the ingenuity. And so whatever age and whatever sort of budget you have, that people would be sort of enchanted by coming into one of your shops and finding something. I think, and did you had maybe an example of that, Sean? Did you have school children or something? Did you do something nice for school?
Yeah, we've had local school kids come to our exhibitions, and you can see when they walk through the shop door that they think, what are we doing here? It's boring antiques. But then all of a sudden you say to them, why do you think this chair is made to fold up so quickly on board a ship? And you say to them, because when the call clear the decks comes up, you've got to get all of the cannon into action, and the cannon were all over the ship. And so you've got to move the furniture quickly. And if you can't move it quickly, it's overboard. So naval furniture, you don't have bolts that you've got to undo and legs with screws on, takes too long. And all of a sudden, the stuff is cool and exciting. And you're on a battleship in a war fighting Napoleon, or you're at Trafalgar on a naval chair. And it comes alive.
Does anyone persuade mum and dad to walk out with one for them for their bedroom? I mean, my son would definitely be nagging for.
Well, yeah, occasionally, yeah. I mean, you know, when kids come into the shop and you can tell a lot of the time they just want to move on to the next shop, but the parents want to look, then you've got to say to them, I bet you can't find the secret drawer on this campaign chest.
Yeah.
And you give them a few clues, and all of a sudden, you know, it's an antique. But even though mum and dad said, don't touch anything when you come in, the owner of the shop is saying, yeah, touch it, play with it, let's have some fun.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it's all about. And as Allan said, this stuff, most of it, apart from his torpedoes, are there to be used. A lot of people buy campaign chests for their son's bedrooms. If it's survived a war, hopefully it'll survive a 15-year-old boy.
I love that. Tim, in terms of sort of your collector base, what is your collector base in terms of who is, you know, who's collecting? And if you were going to, because it's so varied what you sell, and yes, the core is all the luggage. So what would you start as, I suppose, with as a quintessential piece? But then, yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, the collector base is now very global, and you know that is a huge positive of the internet, that it has broadened our customer base so much. I mean, entry level, I'd always say if you were looking for a piece of luggage, to actually look for an English brand, because I think they represent incredible value. You know, if you can afford a Vuitton trunk, fantastic. I mean, it's going to appreciate probably more than anything else. But actually, you can look at a piece by Asprey or Insel or Drew & Sons, and the quality was equally good, and yet it's, you know, it's a much more accessible level. But I mean, then it sort of broadens out into, there are so many different fields. You can go into sporting, you can go into, you know, cigar, barware. But we're saying about people using things. I think there's nothing better. Everything should be used. You know, you shouldn't be afraid to take your wardrobe trunk with you, and you know, it's a good excuse to.
You talked at the beginning. You talked about polishing. Is that you just use ordinary sort of shoe polish? Do you on the? I mean, obviously you get not for your very expensive Louis Vuitton. You might ask someone to help you, but I mean, presumably these pieces, if you handle them and touch them, that maybe does them good in a way.
Absolutely,
sometimes.
with leather, it absolutely does. Yeah, you can see, for instance, in a cigar case where it's been handled. You know, the natural oils in your hand actually are perfect. It's such a natural material that in the end that it needs that nourishment. So I think it's always, you need to be careful with polishing, because it is actually, you know, with leather particularly, it's easy to spoil it. But be cautious. But treat it like your favorite pair of shoes.
Yeah, and in terms of, I mean, one of the other things that strikes me, and we've talked about it a little bit, but is this sort of the craftsmanship. And I just wonder, I think, have you been involved with London Craft Week at all? I mean, has it helped in terms of people appreciating and understanding? Because your reference to Asprey, my first job, my Saturday job, was in Asprey leather department, and I remember my favorite was going to the workshops up above, which have most of them have gone, but
sadly, but actually that is emblematic of how those businesses grew. You know, they valued their craftsmen, and they, you know, celebrated them and had them in the shop. And I think it's a great shame now that a lot of businesses have sort of relegated them really to a factory elsewhere, whereas they were completely, you know, incorporated into the business. I mean, I think London Craft Week has been an incredible spark for broadening people's appreciation of craftsmanship, and we do see it, and people just look at things with more understanding now. And I think the more you learn about how things are made, the better you appreciate them. And Craft Week has done great things. And
I'm loving, I'm getting distracted by the gyroscope, just kind of
Very
turning. It's lovely. I love it. It's great. It's reminding me.
It is actually, it's indicative of the involvement, actually. When you say, you know, I was going to say that this is at home, not because I want to, well, as it turned out, it was here anyway, but it's at home because I show it to my child, my little one.
Yeah.
And I often bring toys home, and I think that although we deal in some things that are quite expensive or larger priced items, there are a lot of nice small things that you can buy. They're toys, wooden toys, they're train sets, mechanical wind-up train sets, and it's a great way of. Everyone thinks that you must have an iPad or something, but actually these toys, we've experienced it a lot in our house because of our community. So we bring toys, you know, wind-up toys and games, and the kids love it. And you can find great small toys for tens of pounds all over the place at work. Little games, ice hockey, wooden toys from the 50s, 20s, and it's okay to use them. It's even okay to break them because that's what they were made for. But the kids in general, it completely blows their mind. You get these kids coming and they just think, wow, what is this? What, you know, so there is I feel there's a duty for the dealers to actually show and bring children in, because you're talking to the three people that are actually quite open-minded. I mean, I never tell children not to touch in the shop unless I'm worried that it might fall on them, but not actually. That's my only worry. But it's not because I'm worried they're going to break anything, because it's already been there for 100 years at least, or maybe, you know. So, but I think it's very important to bear that in mind, and you open up children's minds, even if they don't want to become a collector. They have an exposure to wonderful things and realize that there's much more going on than just, you know, the screen.
No, I think you're so right, and I think it's something that dealers are getting. I mean, you're right, you're a different breed, but I think people are getting more comfortable with it, and it's something that the auction houses, I think, did very well early on. In that, when I was studying for my A levels, I just used to go to them, and there you were allowed to touch everything and look at everything in a preview, whether it was kind of even Van Gogh, you know, you could get someone to let you have a look at it, and having that access that normally is either behind a door with a bell on it or in a museum. And I think, you're very generous. I've watched you with my own son kind of be
well, I was
nice.
going to say, I think your son sat on an ejection seat once, didn't he?
Yes. I mean, and looked through the binoculars and probably stuck his fingers all over the glass lens. But anyway,
nothing's going to happen to them.
We are running out of time, and I just wondered, Gillian, did you have any additional questions you wanted to ask before I sort of did a thank you?
I don't have any questions right now. That was really interesting to hear about all those different pieces, but
well, I thank you so much for your time. I'm very conscious. I mean, we're extra lucky that we've got you today when your shops have all just reopened. So I really hope you do some great trading over the next few weeks in the run up to Christmas and way beyond, actually. I mean, let's hope that we can continue to stay open for a while. Today, we are launching LAPADA First. Sean very kindly gave a mention to that earlier. And this is a preview of a selection of items from LAPADA members that are nowhere else on the website, and for those 5 days they won't be on their own website or any other marketplaces. So we thought that people are really missing that sort of tension and preview of being able to go to a fair or an exhibition, and so this is your online version, and it will be once a month, the first Thursday of every month. We will preview some of those items. So I think it launches at 1 p.m. today. Is that correct, Gillian?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct. So log on and enjoy. And thank you so much, Tim, Sean, and Alan, for this morning's conversation. It'll be on YouTube and we can share it so that other people can watch it as well. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for Cultural Comms for creating LAPADA Leaders for us, and also for Gillian, who put it all together. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.